Good morning. Welcome to the Community Church of Chapel Hill, Unitarian Universalist. My name is Don Katahdin, and I'm a member of the Worship Associates Ministry. I especially welcome any visitors or newcomers to our church and call your attention to the special note for you on the back of the order of service which says, "Welcome guests and newcomers." I would also like to welcome those of you attending online. Lyrics to hymns may be found on the live stream screen, and a complete order of service is available on the link in the Sunday email and on the church website. Whoever you are, whomever you love, however you arrived at this beloved place, you are welcome here. As a congregation, we are requiring masks during the 9:30 church service and religious education programs. However, masks are optional during the 11:15 church service and religious education programs at this time. Masks are also optional outdoors and during the in-person Sunday social held immediately following this service. The online Sunday social is hosted by Rachel Rose and will be held at 1 p.m. And the Zoom link is in the weekly announcements and the Sunday morning email. Please turn off or silence any cell phones that we may have a more worshipful experience. So, I want to mention this beautiful artwork around us. Kathy Klopfenstein, who's here this morning, is the artist whose work is hanging here in the sanctuary. Kathy graduated from the University of Connecticut with a Bachelor of Fine Arts and received a Master of Science degree from Western Connecticut University. She is a silver signature member of the Watercolor Society of North Carolina and served on the board of directors for 8 years. She has had a painting juried into the Society's annual juried exhibition for the last 7 years and received the Winsor and Newton Award for Pottery Market. Pottery Market is actually the very first painting here on the left. So she received the award for that. So thank you very much, Kathy. I now call on Gerald Bonner to tell us about Share the Plate.
Thank you, Don. Good morning, everybody. I'm Gerald Bonner, and today I'm wearing no hat, but I'm representing the Share the Plate community service. Share the Plate every year raises tons of money. How many of you have volunteer organizations you'd like to write a big fat check for? Raise your hand. Okay, well, look at your neighbors because they are gracious and they kindly give every year. So right now, at this time of year, we're opening up applications for Share the Plate. You can go online from the website and fill out the application. We're looking for about 10 to 12 nonprofits that are looking for fundraising. They can earn anywhere between $1,200 to $5,000. We've helped Orange County Rape Crisis. We do Interfaith Council. We do Charles House. We do all these wonderful things. And so if you want to help them out financially and your things are tough these days, this wonderful community will do that for you. We're also tabling today out after the service, so come by, say hello. We're looking for volunteers. My co-chair is Brenda Rogers. She and I took over from Jane and Jill, who have done a wonderful job, have everything well placed. So all you got to do is fill out the easy forms or ask us how to help you do it, and we'll be glad to help you get money for your favorite nonprofit. Thank you, and have a good day.
Our opening hymn this morning is number 1035. It is a song of freedom from South Africa. Let us please rise in body or in spirit and join in singing 1035, Freedom is Coming.
oh freedom, oh freedom, oh freedom, freedom is coming, oh freedom, oh freedom, oh freedom, freedom is coming, yeah. Oh freedom, oh freedom, oh freedom, freedom is coming, oh freedom, oh freedom, oh freedom, freedom is coming. Yes, I know. Oh yes, I know. Oh yes, I know. Oh yes, I know. Freedom is coming. Oh yes, I know. Oh yes, I know. Oh yes, I know. Freedom is coming. Freedom. Oh freedom. Oh freedom. Oh freedom. Freedom is coming. Oh freedom. Oh freedom. Oh freedom. Freedom is coming. Oh yes, I know.
Imagine a line that runs from Moses to Harriet Tubman and to all the conductors on the Underground Railroad leading the enslaved out of slavery. Imagine a line that runs from the Israelites crossing the Red Sea to the protesters crossing the Edmund Pettus Bridge. No easy walk to freedom. Imagine a line that runs from Moses to Judy Heumann and to all who fought for disability rights. A line that runs to the drag queens at the Stonewall Inn in 1969, that runs through to people rising up for Black lives, for climate justice, for gun control, for democracy. Imagine a line that runs to you. Come, let us worship together. You will find the words for lighting the chalice in your order of service. Please join me in reading them if you wish to do so. May the light we now kindle inspire us to use our powers to heal and not to harm, to help and not to hinder, to bless and not to curse, to serve you, Spirit of freedom.
Daylight again, following me to bed. I think about 100 years ago, how my fathers were led. I think I see a valley covered with bones and blue. All the brave soldiers who cannot get older, they're asking after you. side. Do we find the cost of freedom buried in the ground? Mother Earth will swallow you. Lay your body down. Find the cost of freedom buried in the ground. Mother Earth will swallow you. Lay your body down. Lay your body down.
Wow, like a electric charge, static charge. Did you all hear that? That's cool. I need to de-static cling myself or something this morning. Sorry, that just totally made me lose track of where I was. Now you all are laughing. Start over again, yes. Each week, we hold in our service a time for sharing the joys and the sorrows that we bring into this beloved community. It's at this time, if you've come with either a personal joy or a personal sorrow to share, you're invited to come forward, place a stone in the water bowl, say your name, and briefly share your joy or your sorrow. Let us enter into this time of tenderness and trust. Are there any joys and sorrows this morning?
Good morning. My name is Dawn Carter. I placed this stone this morning for my former mother-in-law, Sandy. She is being taken care of by Duke Hospice in her home. I had the pleasure to be able to spend some time with her this week. That was very sweet and special. She's in good spirits, as is her family, but she and my father-in-law have been married for 70 years. She has 3 adult children, lots of children, grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and just if you will hold them in your hearts as they move through this journey they have ahead of them in the next few weeks. Thank you.
I'm Norbert Lechner.
And I'm Judy Lechner, and we have a joy. We just celebrated our 56th anniversary.
Wedding anniversary.
Wedding anniversary.
I'm Rachel Rose, and I bring a sorrow today. Some of you may remember Elizabeth Allure, who was part of our staff, a beloved member of our staff for a couple of years, and her ex-husband, but the father of their 3 children, was killed in a bike accident this week. And he was a beloved member of the community, and I ask that we all hold her and her 3 children in our hearts.
My name's Miranda Hallquist, and I have a joy to share today. We moved to Chapel Hill in July of 2020, in part because my brother-in-law and his family live here, and my mother and father-in-law live in Greensboro, and we were excited to be closer to that part of our family. The joy today is that for a long time it's been very challenging for my in-laws who have wanted to move to Chapel Hill to be even just that much closer than Greensboro. The housing market's been really hard, but they closed on a house 2 weeks ago in our neighborhood, and their house goes on the market today in Greensboro. So I'm just so joyful that everything's falling into place for them and for our family.
Hi, I'm Niels Brubaker. I have two joys I want to share. One is my oldest granddaughter this week. She's 14 years old in ninth grade. She's in Iceland for a week with a group of other kids from her school touring that amazing country. So I'm really happy for her that she's able to have that kind of an opportunity at such a young age. And the other joy I wanted to share is at the beginning of this month, my son and I went on a trip to California. We spent a week in Death Valley National Park and then drove up the state and visited my uncle and visited also Berkeley, California, which was where I was born and where I spent the first years of my childhood. And the Death Valley trip was all my son's idea. I had never had any interest in going there before, but he was really excited, and I just was so glad that he invited me to come with him, and we had a great time. It's a beautiful national park. And the other aspect of that trip was we decided to visit my uncle, who lives in Stockton, California. He's the only surviving member of that generation. There were 8 children. One of them was my father. One of them was this young uncle, and he's still alive. He's 94, and he's in great shape. And we just spent a whole day with him, and he was just so lively, so energetic, and he looks just like my father. It was like really eerie to be looking at this man's face who was the spitting image of my father, and yet his personality is totally different. So he's actually a much nicer fellow with you. Really engaged, he's got bright, shining eyes and everything. So it was really fun spending time with him. Thank you.
A final stone is placed for all those joys and sorrows that we hold in our hearts that were not spoken this morning. I invite you to join with me in time of meditation and prayer. Spirit of life, source of our being and our becoming, this week, Christians around the world prepare to celebrate the Holy Week. This week, Jewish people prepare for the Passover, which begins on Wednesday night. We move into April, into the final fullness of spring, into Earth Month, a time of recognizing our shared planet. We hold in our hearts all the joys and the sorrows shared this morning. We give thanks for the connections of family, for time spent with those we love far and near. We hold in our hearts the losses, those who struggle with illness, those cared for in their final time. Heartbreak, among those we know and love. On this morning, we rededicate ourselves to the practice of freedom, to the quest for liberation, our own and for the liberation of all people of the world. Help us to reach out across that small space that is ever between us, to encourage each other, to meet one another with compassion, and to work for greater freedom for ourselves and for all. Amidst the prayers of this community and amidst the stirrings of our own hearts, let us hold before us a time of silent meditation. I invite you to be still with me for a few moments. Amen. Our sung meditation this morning is Dona, Nobis, Pacem, and Eric Leith will lead us in it.
Dona, Nobis, Pacem was conceived by Mozart as a three-part canon or round. We have two people. Is there anybody else who would be, or a few people who feel like they... Don, going to come up? Okay, so in that case, we'll do three parts, and I will play it once instrumentally, during which I invite you to seek your peace and listen and remind you of the melody as it goes. And then we'll sing it once together as a congregation, and then 2 times through as a three-part round. We'll start with this section over here, then in the middle, and then Jean will lead the third part.
I'll just do this in unison. I'll move. Our responsive reading is number 593 by Desmond Tutu. And I invite you to read the italicized text. 593, let's see. All right. Liberation is costly. Even after the Lord had delivered the Israelites from Egypt, they had to travel through the desert. They had to bear the responsibilities and difficulties of freedom. There was starvation and thirst, and they kept complaining. They complained that their diet was monotonous. Many of them preferred the days of bondage and the flesh pots of Egypt. Just remember that liberation is costly. It needs unity. We must hold hands and refuse to be divided. We must be ready. Some of us will not see the day of our liberation physically, but those people will have contributed to the struggle. Let us be united. Let us be filled with hope. Let us be those who respect one another. Okay. Freely we have received gifts that minister to our needs of body and spirit. Gladly we bring to our church and its wide concerns a portion of this bounty. If you wish to donate online, the information is on the church's website. We will now receive the morning offering.
I could be like
like a bird in the sky. How sweet it would be if I found I could fly. I'd soar to the sun and look down at the sea. Then I'd sing, 'cause I know how it feels to be free.
Thank you, Eric, for leading us all in all the music this morning. Glenn's off this Sunday, and Eric, thank you so much for leading just our music, and it's a treat to hear you. Before I start my sermon, I just want to put in a little plug for next week. Next Sunday is Easter Sunday, and we're going to do as is our custom, and weather permitting, we're going to have 2 services. The 9:30 service is at Memorial Rock Amphitheater, which is on our campus here. If you've never been there, we'll have ushers and greeters pointing you the direction. It's a couple hundred yards into the woods on a gravel path, and there's an outside amphitheater there, and the 9:30 service, weather permitting, is Easter in nature, and then the 11:15 service will be here in the sanctuary. Hope to see you at both. I mean, I'll be at both, but I'm not expecting that you'll be. If you want to come to both, you can come to both, but I'll be at both. This week, on Wednesday, marks the beginning of the Jewish festival of Passover, when Jewish people celebrate and commemorate and retell the story of the Israelites, led by Moses, demanding freedom from Pharaoh, retelling the story of hard-hearted Pharaoh refusing to free the captive Israelites and being afflicted by a series of dreadful plagues, retelling the story of Moses leading the Israelites to the Red Sea and then miraculously across or through the Red Sea and out of Egypt, and retelling the story of the Israelites having escaped from Egypt, wandering in the desert for 40 years before at long last finally reaching the promised land. The story of the Exodus from Egypt is a particular story, the ancient story of a particular tribe in a particular geographic area at a particular moment in history. But it's also much, much more than that. It's also a universal story. Anytime a people stand up for their own liberation, for their own freedom, anytime a people stand up and demand, "Let my people go," anytime an oppressor is compared to hard-hearted Pharaoh, anytime we are asked to leave the world of the familiar that does not serve us and cross into some new and unfamiliar world that is yet to be, we are in some ways reliving that Exodus story. The Exodus story has had a particular connection with the African American experience. The struggle against slavery and later the struggle of the civil rights movement were inspired by and imbued with imagery from the Exodus story of the Hebrew Bible. Thus, Wade in the Water is both a song about stepping into that Red Sea, across the Red Sea to freedom, and it's also a song about crossing the Ohio River to the north to freedom. In thinking about Passover this year, I was drawn to think of Archbishop Desmond Tutu's reading from our hymnal, "Liberation is Costly," in which he connects the South American struggle against apartheid with the Exodus struggle from the Hebrew Scriptures. Liberation is costly, Archbishop Desmond Tutu writes. Even after the Lord had delivered the Israelites from Egypt, They had to travel through the desert. They had to bear the responsibilities and difficulties of freedom. There was starvation and thirst, and they kept complaining. They complained that their diet was monotonous. Many of them preferred the days of bondage and the flesh pots of Egypt. We must remember that liberation is costly. It needs unity. I'm also particularly drawn to the way Unitarian Universalist minister Kathleen McTeague retells a portion of the Exodus story. She writes, "When the escape from Egypt was certain, when the last furious wave had closed over the enemy's heads and the dangerous waters lay smooth again, when the Israelites could finally turn toward the future without fear that the past would snatch them back, what did they see before them? Not the promised land flowing with milk and honey, but the wide and terrifying wilderness that would claim them for 40 long, hard years of wandering. They were not carried along on a surge of vindicated faith, but stumbled forward with paralyzing doubts. And instead of enjoying sweet unity, after all they'd been through, they were torn by bickering and division. They walked into restless uncertainty and discomfort and fell asleep on the hard ground to wake feeling ashamed for dreaming of the easier life of slavery they had left behind." And so this morning, what I'd like to do is offer a few meditations, 3 meditations related to this part of the Exodus story. The first meditation I call a meditation on whining. I'll admit I've always been particularly struck by this part of the Exodus story, contained in the Bible and then re-amplified in other written versions of it. The whining, the complaining, and bickering of the Israelites after they've left Egypt. The community threatening to fracture and divide under the pressures that they face. You know me, I can't help but read the Exodus story as a story of leadership, and inherently as a story of religious leadership, which is not to say that I'm Moses, and which is not to say that any of you are Israelites wandering in the desert. But we're also a congregation, a community of people trying to get to our own promised land and trying to bring our world, or at least our small corner of it, whatever that may be, even closer to the promised land than we are. I'm not Moses and we're not Israelites wandering in the desert, but part of leadership and part of life is dealing with disillusionment. How do we regard the complaints, the groans, and the moans of the Israelites? We could regard them as ungrateful and entitled, or we could choose to see their complaints as a reasonable response to stress, hardship, trauma, and fear. There's complaining about the difficulty of being free, and then there's complaining about starvation. What's that advertising slogan for the candy bar? You're not yourself when you're hungry, or something like that. There is this trope that appears and reappears again and again and again in Scripture. It goes like this: there is a scarcity, and look, there is enough. The Israelites are starving in the desert, manna from heaven. The crowd of 5,000 who go to see Jesus is hungry. Multiplication of fishes and loaves. The wine runs out at the wedding, at Cana, water to wine. Perhaps exploring this trope is another sermon entirely. But there is the idea that what you need may be closer at hand than you know. And I think in our lives, one of those struggles is when we're trying to move out of one reality that did not serve us to another that does. There is that importance of maintaining unity and resisting the urge to fracture and fragment. There is that facing of disillusionment. And so I want to ask you to join me in that meditation. Have you found that in your own life? That moving from one place that doesn't serve you, hopefully to another place, but finding that desert space, that hard desert space in the middle. The title I've given to my second meditation is, Where Do You Find Yourself in the Story You Find Yourself In? I had fun with this part. So for this morning, I had the idea of basing the sermon around the Archbishop Desmond Tutu reading, Liberation is Costly. But there are actually another couple of readings dealing with the Passover and the Exodus in our hymnal. And one of those is number 631. And I'm going to invite you to, if your hymnals are handy, I'm going to invite you to turn to it. We've already made you do one responsive reading this morning, so we're not going to make you do a second. But if you kind of want to follow along. Interestingly enough, 631 is one of three readings in the hymnal that are attributed to Congregation Beth El, Sudbury, Massachusetts. So a Jewish synagogue in a small town in Massachusetts. And there must be a story for why we have three readings from one Jewish congregation in our hymnal. And I have no idea what that story is, but I kind of want to find it out. I invite you to listen and follow along. What sacrifices would we make for freedom today? What would we leave? How far would we go? How deeply would we look within ourselves? Our ancestors had no time to await the rising of the bread, yet we, who have that time, what do we do to be worthy of our precious inheritance? We were slaves in Egypt, but now we are free. How easy it is for us to relive the days of our bondage as we sit in the warmth and comfort at our Seder. How much harder to relieve the pain of those who live in the bitterness of slavery today. One of the things that I find interesting in the reading is how the voice kind of changes in it. It begins with these questions. What sacrifices would we make? What would we leave? How far would we go? And then by the end of the reading, there is this almost sense of liberation that is inherent. How easy it is for us to relive the days of our bondage. It's the past as we sit in the warmth and comfort of our Seder. How much harder to relieve the pain of those who live in the bitterness of slavery today. I asked this question at the first service, and I want to ask it again to all of you. Do you consider, in thinking about your own kind of relationship with liberation, with freedom, do you consider yourself as a fundamentally free person, a person who gets to experience freedom and liberation, and oppression or lack of freedom is something that other people experience, and that you share a different relationship than others? Or do you fundamentally feel like you yourself are restricted, held in a state of unfreedom, that your own freedom is restricted in some way? And I find that to be an interesting I find that to be an interesting move in this reading from what would we sacrifice, what would we give up, what would we change, which is a moving kind of out of a state of a lack of freedom, to then in the end of it saying freedom is something that we would work for other people. And so that's my second meditation, is this question of freedom. Is it, are you kind of free and your goal is to make everybody else in the world as free as you are, or is it there's some sense that you yourself are held in a state of restriction and you yourself need that liberation as well? This is meditation, not telling you, but asking you questions. And the third meditation is, I call it, what does liberation look like for us? But the other title of it is, who are you in the story? In reading any story in the scripture, there's a question of, or a way of approaching it, to ask yourself who you are in the story. And the right answer is that you're everybody in the story. I'm just going to give away that's the right answer. Just at different times, there may be some character that appeals more. And so I want to look at the story of the Exodus from this question of who are we? In the story, are we fundamentally a free and liberated people who need to work to bring even more of the freedom that we enjoy to the rest of the world, especially to a category of people we would call other? Is that who we are? Or are we fundamentally an unfree people, our own liberation denied by systems of oppression that restrict and deprive us? Might we even be unaware of the ways that we are lacking in freedom? Are we journeyers from one place where we're clearly not to another place where we're clearly not, struggling along that journey, knowing that it may take generations and lifetimes? Are we Pharaoh? When you read the stories from the Bible, it can be a mistake to assume that you're on the side of the heroes. Do we need to examine our own hard-heartedness, our own self-destructive stubbornness, and the ways that we may be complicit in the lack of freedom in our world? So what does liberation look like? It's a sentiment that's been rephrased many times, but it was the 19th century Jewish activist and poet Emma Lazarus who first said, "Until we are all free, we are none of us free." Martin Luther King expressed these sentiments when he wrote, "We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny." What does our own liberation look like? We might turn in our living, in our searching, in our working, in our dreaming. We might search and turn to those who have expressed a longing for freedom, who have expressed a call for liberation, who have expressed a dream of a world made more fair and more free. When we join our own stories and our own lives with those stories and lives demanding freedom, we learn something of our own liberation. Thank you for joining with me in these meditations on freedom and on liberation. And we're going to sing a closing song this morning, It's a closing song that is about that journey to the promised land. It is number 1018, Come and Go With Me, and I invite you to rise in body or in spirit as we sing together.
The words for extinguishing the chalice are in your order of service. Please join me in saying them if you wish to do so. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Let us thank all those who made this service worshipful. Good. Please join us in singing Shalom. The words are in your order of service. As you are comfortable, please either hold hands with the person next to you or cross your arms over your heart.